Minister to his new role.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and may I begin by thanking my honourable friend for securing the debate and for raising the points today, and also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to note the contributions by the members for Central Ayrshire, for Strangford, for Llanelli, for Carmarthen East and East Dunbartonshire, who made forcefully the point that this is an issue that affects all parts of the United Kingdom. Mr. Deputy, because the issues are complex and my honourable friend quite rightly laid them out in full to get them on the record, I am rather short of time, so if I may, I'm going to move rather quickly to answer some of my honourable friend's recommendations. And I would also say I'm happy to follow up with other honourable members today if they want to raise specific points in their constituency. I think everyone here has noted the pressures on our NHS, and indeed, prior to taking on my own role, I've spent the last 6 months spending a considerable amount of time with my own GPs, and I know that the issues relating to the pressures on GPs are complex. They include issues to do with the overall set of compensation, it is the overall burnout, and quite rightly, my honourable friend mentioned the issue of abuse of NHS staff, which has occurred to a shameful degree over the last 6 months, and which no member of our health service should ever have to deal with. But my honourable friend has focused today on the issues of pensions tax and the NHS, and has made 3 specific recommendations. The first relates to the differential use of CPI figures, and he is absolutely right to raise it today, because it is the spike in inflation that has drawn bare some of the issues about the way in which these issues are calculated. If I may say, Mr. Speaker, the issue relates to the disparity between the CPI figure used for uprating the opening value of a member's benefits and the CPI figure used to assess re-evaluation of public service schemes. This effect is particularly notable in the NHS pension scheme, where accrued benefits are adjusted upwards each year by CPI plus 1.5%, which, to be fair, makes it one of the most generous schemes available. But I do understand that this difference in figures will lessen the headroom the scheme members will have in their annual allowance calculation, and that this may lead more members exceeding the annual allowance, and for those who already routinely exceed it, for them to exceed it by more, leading to some receiving annual allowance tax charges. The BMA have asked the government to amend the Finance Act 2004 so that the CPI figures used in uprating the opening value and that used for revaluation in public schemes are the same. However, there are some issues that must be considered in discussion. The Honourable may not have mentioned. Firstly, that the government has a duty to balance support for all pension savers across the United Kingdom. The use of September CPI to measure inflation in the year before the tax year is a well-established feature that is used across the tax system. Any changes would impact all pension savers, not just NHS staff. The current approach provides certainty to individuals at the start of the tax year about what their opening pension value will be for annual allowance purposes. Now, I do appreciate that for those with a defined benefit pension alone, this certainty may not be seen as much of an advantage. However, for others across the country who may have some defined benefit accrual but are now saving into a far less generous defined contribution scheme, this certainly is a benefit and allows them to plan their finances and pension. I really can't, I'm so sorry, I've only got 2 and a bit minutes left, if I may. Secondly, there is a perception that the use of different CPI figures will disproportionately hit senior NHS staff. This is said to be because the revaluation of accrued rights in 1995 and 2008 sections of the NHS pension scheme will lead to a large pension input amount for clinicians, whilst the annual allowance calculation will use a lower CPI figure when calculating their opening value. This is the so-called pseudo-growth that my honourable friend mentioned. I'm afraid that this point ignores the fact that for most NHS employees in the 95 and 2008 section of the NHS pension scheme, their accrued benefits remain linked to their final salary, which means that they do not have their benefits revalued each year. Thirdly, concerns over so-called negative accrual that cannot be used to offset positive accrual in later years. This point conflates actual pension accrual that benefits pension savers with notional accrual used for purposes of the annual allowance calculation. It is a fact that defined benefit schemes are more difficult to compare against the annual allowance than defined contribution schemes. In a given year where individuals accrue rights to future annual pension payments, it is necessary to calculate a comparable figure for their savings to test against the annual allowance to ensure fairness between those in defined contribution and defined benefit schemes. I will, however, just make on this point that I do think that my honourable friend and honourable members have raised an important issue in the debate this evening, and that I will go away and will consider it further. On the two other recommendations, Mr. Deputy Speaker, briefly, on my honourable friend's second recommendation, I know that the BMA and others have said that action taken at the budget in 2020 on the tapering allowance was not enough. The cost of this intervention, however, was £2.2 billion over 5 years, and it was targeted at the very highest earners in society. It will be hard to justify, especially in the current climate, focusing more government support on them. This includes replicating the temporary scheme used in the 2019-2020 tax year. And on my honourable friend's third recommendation for an unregistered scheme, and which was also mentioned by the honourable member for Carmarthen East, I also understand that comparison the senior clinicians draw to the position of the Judicial Pension Scheme 2022, which is unregistered for tax purposes, however believe that there remains a distinction to be drawn between NHS high earners and the judiciary and the unique circumstances of judicial appointments. In particular, judges are not able to return to private practice after taking up office, and many judges take a significant pay cut to join the judiciary. However, we all recognise there are significant issues about doctor retention, GP retention. I think the points here raised this evening have struck a note with me, and I look forward to discussing these issues further with honourable members in the future. Yeah.